The story we have been watching reaches a turning point that few people expect when they first read it. Saul is the king of Israel, a man who commands armies and carries the authority of the throne. David, on the other hand, is a young man now running for his life after the king's anger turns deadly. What began as a celebration of David's victories slowly became a dangerous rivalry, and now the king has already sent soldiers to capture the man he once welcomed into the palace. Yet something strange has already happened twice. Saul sent one group of soldiers to Ramah where David had gone to seek refuge near the prophet Samuel. Those soldiers arrived expecting to carry out the king's command, but instead of arresting David they became part of the prophetic gathering taking place there. When Saul heard the report, he sent another group of soldiers expecting the mission to finally succeed. Instead, the same thing happened again, and the authority of the throne appeared to collapse the moment those men stepped into that place. Imagine how frustrating that must have been for Saul. Kings are not accustomed to seeing their commands fail, especially when those commands are carried out by trained soldiers. The palace is built on the assumption that authority produces results, and yet the reports coming back from Ramah were telling a very different story. Two groups of soldiers had arrived with clear orders, and both groups failed in exactly the same way. At this point the story moves into one of the most surprising moments in the entire narrative. Saul begins to realize that sending soldiers is not solving the problem, and the king decides to do what powerful leaders often do when things stop working the way they expect. He decides to go himself. If the soldiers cannot bring David back, then the king will personally step into the situation and enforce his authority. From Saul's perspective, this decision probably seemed obvious. Authority becomes stronger the closer it gets to the throne, and surely the presence of the king would succeed where the soldiers had failed. Yet the story has already shown us that something unusual is happening in Ramah, and the atmosphere surrounding Samuel and the prophets has already interrupted every attempt to capture David. As Saul begins traveling toward Ramah, the tension of the story quietly rises. The king is moving toward the very place where his authority has already failed twice. The soldiers who entered that gathering found themselves overtaken by the prophetic atmosphere surrounding Samuel and the prophets. The question now becomes what will happen when the king himself enters that same environment. When Saul finally approaches Ramah, the story reveals that the same unseen force is still present there. The gathering of prophets has not changed, and the atmosphere surrounding them remains the same. The moment Saul enters that place, the same pattern that overtook the soldiers begins unfolding again. Instead of seizing David and restoring control, Saul himself becomes part of the prophetic moment unfolding around Samuel. This moment completely reverses the power dynamic that seemed so certain earlier in the story. The king who believed he controlled the situation suddenly discovers that his authority cannot override what is happening in that place. The man who came to enforce his command finds himself overtaken by the same spiritual atmosphere that stopped his soldiers. Stories like this remind us that history often turns in ways leaders never expect. Saul believed that power, position, and command would determine the outcome of this pursuit. Yet the story reveals that events were already unfolding according to a much larger purpose. David's journey was never simply about escaping the king. It was about preparing a future that had already begun long before Saul's anger ever appeared. This is where the deeper meaning of the story begins to emerge. David's darkest moments were not simply obstacles placed in his path. They were shaping the man he would eventually become. The young shepherd who had already been secretly anointed would pass through seasons of danger, rejection, and exile before the crown ever reached his head. If you have been following this story with us, you have already seen how every attempt to destroy David's future only pushed the story closer to the purpose that had been set in motion years earlier. Saul believed he was controlling the outcome, yet every decision he made was quietly moving the story forward in ways he could not see. This is one of the reasons stories like this continue to resonate across generations. They remind us that moments of fear, rejection, or uncertainty do not always mean the story is ending. Sometimes those moments are shaping the very strength that will be needed later in the journey. If you enjoy exploring stories like this one, where history, scripture, and human experience intersect in powerful ways, make sure you follow the channel and subscribe. New episodes continue to explore the moments inside these ancient stories that often get overlooked when we read them too quickly. There are many more moments in the story of David that reveal how leadership is shaped long before the crown ever appears. Each step of his journey shows how pressure, opposition, and unexpected turns can forge the character that future responsibility requires. As the story continues, David's path will lead him through caves, wilderness, and years of uncertainty before the throne of Israel ever becomes his. Yet the foundation of that future is already being formed in the very moments when everything seems most unstable. And that may be the most powerful lesson hidden inside this chapter of the story. The moments that appear to threaten the future are often the same moments preparing it. What makes this moment even more remarkable is the contrast unfolding between the palace and Ramah. Inside the palace, Saul believed authority flowed from position, command, and control. Every system of leadership he understood depended on the assumption that power could force the outcome he desired. Yet in Ramah the story reveals a different kind of authority, one that does not rely on commands, soldiers, or political strength. Samuel and the prophets represented a different center of influence within Israel. Their gathering was built around listening rather than commanding, around spiritual discernment rather than political power. The moment Saul's soldiers entered that environment, the authority they carried from the throne simply lost its effect. The atmosphere surrounding the prophets reshaped the behavior of everyone who entered it. When Saul himself arrived and experienced the same overwhelming moment, the story exposed something deeper than a failed mission. It revealed that the king who believed he controlled the future was standing inside a moment that had already been shaped long before he arrived. David's path toward the throne was not unfolding because Saul allowed it. It was unfolding despite Saul's attempts to stop it. This is one of the quiet lessons hidden inside the story. Human authority often believes it controls the direction of events. Yet history repeatedly shows that greater purposes continue moving forward even when powerful people attempt to block them. Saul thought he was ending David's future, yet every step he took was pushing the story closer to the moment when David would eventually become king. The story of Saul and David is far from over, and the next chapters reveal how the journey from shepherd to king unfolds through trials that few leaders would willingly choose. Yet those very trials become the training ground where destiny begins to take shape.